Two suns burned over the red desert sky as Eli Carter walked through the silent streets of the alien city. Everything felt wrong. The air was too dry, the light too sharp, and the people too quiet. Every alien he passed turned away, whispering in a language he could not understand. Yet one word kept repeating: shame. He followed the sound until he reached the main square, a wide open place built of black stone and metal. In the center stood a tall silver pillar covered in strange glowing symbols. At its base, a woman knelt, chained by her wrists. Her skin shimmered faintly like silver dust, and her hair, long and dark, hung over her face. The crowd of aliens surrounded her in silence. Some watched with cold eyes. Others threw stones that vanished before touching her, disintegrated by the energy field around the pillar. Eli stopped at the edge of the crowd. He didn't belong there, but something inside him refused to move away. The woman lifted her head for a brief moment, and that was when he saw her eyes. They were not like the others. There was fear in them, pain, and beneath that pain, something almost human. A voice echoed through the square, cold and sharp like a blade. "Lira of the seventh line," the alien judge announced, standing above the crowd. "By the law of the Dominion, you are bound to the pillar of shame for betraying your kind. You will remain here until the sands consume you." The crowd murmured again. Eli didn't understand their language, but the tone was clear: hate, disgust, and fear. He clenched his fists. He had seen cruelty before, but this was different. She wasn't just being punished, she was being erased. Lira lowered her head again. Her breath trembled, and for a second, Eli thought she might collapse. The metal chains glowed red against her wrists. He could almost smell the heat. The aliens began to leave one by one, satisfied with her suffering until only a few guards remained. Eli stood there frozen, unable to turn away. He didn't know why he cared. He was just a human traitor passing through this side of the galaxy, trying to stay unnoticed. But her eyes, they followed him, silently asking for something: help, hope, anything. That night Eli couldn't sleep. The wind outside his rented room howled like voices crying from the sand. He sat by the window, staring at the faint glow of the pillar in the distance. Every few seconds, lightning flashed behind the horizon, revealing the shape of that silver column like a ghost. He could still see her face, like the bruises, the dirt, and that unbroken spark in her eyes. He told himself not to interfere. Not again. Last time he tried to play hero, people died. But something deep inside wouldn't let him rest. "Just one look," he whispered to himself. "Just to make sure she's still alive." He left his room quietly and walked through the narrow alleys. The city was asleep. Only the hum of alien machines filled the air. When he reached the square, the pillar still glowed faintly, bathing everything in pale blue light. She was still there. Her head was bowed, her breathing weak. The metal cuffs around her wrists pulsed softly with energy. He stepped closer, the sand crunching beneath his boots. Her eyes opened, barely, and focused on him. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered in a voice that sounded broken, yet full of strength. Her accent was strange, but he understood her words. "I couldn't just walk away," Eli said quietly. "What did they do to you?" Her lips trembled. "They call me traitor. I call myself survivor." He noticed the scars on her neck, the marks of the collar she once wore. "Why?" he asked. "What did you do?" "I helped humans," she said softly. "During the war. I freed them from the mines. My people saw it as betrayal." Eli's chest tightened. "And now this?" "The pillar feeds on guilt," she whispered. "It burns until your will is gone." Eli looked at the pillar's smooth metal. Strange symbols crawled across its surface like living light. He reached out, feeling its strange warmth. "If it feeds on guilt," he said slowly, "then it'll starve from me." Her eyes widened. "Don't." But before she could finish, his hand touched the pillar. A sudden surge of energy exploded through the air. The ground shook. Lights flickered across the square. The chains around her wrists began to vibrate, glowing brighter and brighter until they snapped with a blinding flash. The shockwave threw Eli back onto the ground. For a moment he couldn't hear anything, just the pounding of his heart. The pillar stood silent now, the symbols fading one by one. Lira fell forward, free for the first time in years. Eli crawled toward her. "Are you all right?" he asked, coughing. She looked at him in disbelief, eyes shining in the blue light. You freed me, she said, voice trembling. No one has ever dared. Alarms began to echo from the city's towers. Red lights flashed across the skyline. Eli stood, grabbing her hand. We need to move now. She hesitated for a moment, staring at the broken chains on the ground. Then, with one deep breath, she whispered something in her language. A vow, ancient and heavy. When Eli asked what she said, she looked at him with eyes that no longer trembled. I swore, she said, her voice steady now, to repay the one who freed me, with everything I am. And as they vanished into the desert night, the pillar of shame crumbled behind them, the first stone of a dying empire falling to dust. The red moons hung low that night, casting twin shadows across the dunes as Eli and Lira ran through the silent ruins beyond the city walls. The air shimmered with dust and fear. Behind them, distant alarms still echoed, sharp, mechanical, and angry. Eli didn't know how long they had before the alien patrols found their trail. But one thing was certain. There was no going back now. Lira stumbled, her bare feet sinking into the sand. She caught herself on a broken pillar, breathing hard. The glow from the pillar of shame still shimmered faintly on her skin like fading embers. She looked lost, fragile yet fierce. Eli turned toward her. We need to keep moving, he said quietly. They'll be tracking us. I know, she whispered, clutching the chain marks on her wrists. But I can't believe you did it. Did what? He asked, scanning the horizon. Touch the pillar. No one survives that kind of energy. It kills even my kind, Eli gave a faint, humorless smile. Guess I'm just too stubborn to die. For a moment, she just stared at him. Not as a stranger, but as something she didn't have a word for. Then her eyes hardened again. You shouldn't have freed me. They'll hunt you now, too. I've been hunted before, he said. Besides, I couldn't just leave you there. They moved again, deeper into the wasteland, where the sand turned silver under the moons. Lira pointed toward the distant hills. There's an old shelter, she said. A lab I used long ago. We can rest there. When they reached the half-buried structure, Eli noticed strange carvings along its surface, runes that glowed faintly at their presence. The door hissed open after a few touches of Lira's fingers, revealing a cold, empty space filled with broken machinery and long-dead screens. This was your lab? Eli asked, brushing dust off a control panel. It was, she said quietly, walking among the wreckage, before they turned it into a tomb. Eli found an old heating unit and managed to get it working. Warmth slowly filled the room and Lira sank against the wall, her eyes distant. You don't understand what you've done, she said softly. The Dominion doesn't forgive. They'll send hunters for us. He sat beside her, watching the firelight dance on the metal walls. Then we'll deal with them when they come. Lira looked at him, truly looked, as if trying to understand what kind of human would risk his life for someone like her. Why? She finally asked. Why did you help me? Eli's voice was calm, but his eyes carried something deeper. Because I've seen chains like yours before. Not made of metal, but of guilt, fear, and lies. No one deserves to live like that. Her gaze softened. You speak like someone who's lost much. He smiled faintly. Maybe I have. A long silence followed. Outside, the desert wind howled through the cracks. Lira closed her eyes, whispering something in her native tongue. Eli couldn't understand the words, but her tone was heavy with regret. He broke the silence. You said you helped humans during the war. Why? Lira hesitated. Because I saw mercy in them. Something my people called weakness. But when the Dominion began the purges, I couldn't stand by. I freed the captives I could. I thought it would matter. She gave a bitter laugh. It didn't. It mattered to them, Eli said softly. And it matters now. She looked at him again, her eyes glinting in the dim light. You speak as if you know what redemption means. He met her gaze. Maybe I'm still trying to find out. Before she could reply, a faint humming sound filled the air. Lira's eyes widened. Patrol drones, she whispered, rushing to the console. They found us. Eli jumped to his feet, grabbing his plasma pistol. Through a crack in the wall, he could see the distant blue light sweeping across the dunes. How many? Too many, she said, typing rapidly. But I can activate the defense barrier for a few minutes. Do it. The lab trembled as the first energy blasts hit the outer wall. The air shimmered and a blue shield pulsed around them. Eli fired through the narrow opening, hitting one of the drones that exploded into bright dust. The others pulled back, circling, shields dropping fast. Lira shouted, Then we run, Eli said, grabbing her hand again. They dashed out through the rear passage as the shield collapsed behind them. The explosion threw sand and fire into the sky, lighting their path. They didn't look back, only forward toward the endless dark horizon. After miles of silence, Lira finally spoke again. "Back there, you risked your life twice for me," she said softly. "Why keep doing that?" Eli slowed, looking at her through the dim light. "Because sometimes the right thing to do is the most dangerous one." She stared at him, this strange, reckless human who had burned her chains and defied her empire. And for the first time in years, she felt something new stirring within her. Not fear, not guilt, but a fragile spark of hope. As they disappeared into the silver dunes, the alien fleet above the clouds stirred awake, engines rumbling like thunder. The hunt had begun. Dawn crept slowly over the silver dunes, painting the horizon in soft gold. The twin suns rose side by side, casting long shadows across the desert. Eli and Lira had walked all night, leaving behind only footprints and silence. The heat was rising now, dry and sharp, burning through their exhaustion. Every step felt heavier, but neither spoke, both too wary, too lost in thought. By midday, Lira stumbled. Her knees hit the sand and she pressed her hands to the ground, trembling. "I can't," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Eli turned quickly, kneeling beside her. Her skin glowed faintly under the light, but her face was pale, almost gray. He lifted her arm. It was hot, feverish. "You're dehydrated," he said. "You need water?" She shook her head weakly. "You should go. They'll find me soon." Eli frowned, pulling a small canteen from his pack. "Not a chance." He held it to her lips, letting her drink slowly. "I didn't break those chains just to leave you in the sand." When she finished, her breathing steadied. She looked at him for a long moment, as if trying to understand something she couldn't explain. "You risked everything," she said softly. "Why?" Eli's eyes followed the endless desert ahead. "Because sometimes one life saved can weigh more than 100 lost." She closed her eyes, whispering in her alien tongue. The words rolled softly like wind over stone. "What did you say?" Eli asked. "It's an oath," she said. "A promise to those who save what is already broken." He tilted his head. "You have a lot of promises, don't you?" Lira smiled faintly, the first trace of warmth he had seen in her. "I used to make them easily. Before the war, before I learned how fragile truth can be." They walked again as the sun climbed higher. The desert stretched endlessly, shimmering like glass. In the distance, the wreck of an ancient starship jutted from the dunes, its metal bones buried deep in sand. They took shelter inside, where the air was cool and the shadows kind. Eli found a half-broken console and a few pieces of wiring. With a flick of his wrist, he lit a small fire. The warm light filled the empty space. Lira sat quietly across from him, her eyes reflecting the flames. For a while, neither spoke. Only the wind outside whispered through the ship's open hull. Then Lira broke the silence. "Back there, when you touched the pillar, it should have killed you." "I've heard that before," Eli said, smirking faintly. "It wasn't just energy," she continued. "It was judgment. The pillar burns what it sees inside you. Guilt, regret, pain. The more you carry, the faster you die." Eli stared into the fire, his jaw tightening. Maybe it found nothing left to burn. She studied him, reading the weight in his silence. "You've lost someone." He nodded once. "A long time ago. My unit, my family. All gone. I keep moving because if I stop, I start remembering." Lira lowered her gaze. "Then we are not so different." Outside, a gust of wind sent sand cascading through the broken walls. She looked up again, her voice trembling slightly. "When you freed me, I swore an oath. Not the kind our laws demand, it's something older. I owe you a life debt, Eli Carter." He shook his head. "You don't owe me anything." "Yes," she said firmly, "I do. My people believe that when one is freed by another's mercy, their lives become bound and until balance is restored. Sounds like a curse. Sometimes," she said with a faint smile, "it becomes something else." The warmth in her voice caught him off guard. He looked away, but not before she noticed the flicker of emotion in his eyes. Then the sound came, faint but growing. A low hum rolling across the desert. Lira's expression changed instantly. "They're coming." Eli rushed to the doorway, scanning the horizon. In the distance, black shapes glided over the dunes, hovercrafts fast and deadly. "How many?" he asked. "Too many," she replied, her voice steady now. "The hunters. Then we run again. No, she said, standing tall despite her exhaustion. We make our stand here. You freed me from chains, now I'll return the favor. Before Eli could protest, she pressed her palm against the wall of the ship. The ancient symbols on the metal began to glow. Energy rippled outward, forming a faint dome of blue light. What is that? He asked. An old defense field. It won't last long, but long enough. The hum grew louder, engines roaring as dust filled the air. Lira turned to Eli, her eyes fierce and bright. If we die today, human, let it be for something that matters. He grinned, checking the charge on his weapon. That's the only kind of dying I believe in. Outside, the first hunter ship broke through the clouds, dark, sharp, and full of fire. The battle for their freedom was about to begin. The desert sky roared. From beyond the horizon, dark vessels emerged like shadows made of steel, cutting through the sunrise with thunder and flame. The hunters had come, sleek black ships bearing the sigil of the Dominion, wings glowing red from thruster heat. Each one carried soldiers bred for one purpose, to erase rebellion no matter how small. Eli watched from the ruined starship as their dust clouds spread across the dunes. They're sweeping wide, he muttered, loading his rifle. They're not hunting, they're cleansing. Lyra's gaze was fixed on the ships. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes told another story. Recognition, pain, and guilt. The hunters never miss, she said softly. They'll track the energy pulse from the pillar. They'll trace it here. Eli checked the last power cell in his weapon. Then we make it hard for them. You don't understand, she said, turning toward him. Their commander, he's my brother. That made Eli freeze. He turned slowly to her. Your brother? Yes, she said, voice trembling. Commander Rian of the Dominion Guard. He was the one who sentenced me to the pillar. To him, I'm already dead. For a moment, silence hung heavy between them. The air outside vibrated with the hum of engines. Eli met her eyes. Then maybe it's time he saw his ghost. Before Lira could respond, the ground shook. Energy blasts struck the sand just beyond the wreck. The hull trembled. Dust rained from the ceiling. They've found us, Eli said, pulling her down behind the metal wall. Stay low. Blue energy bolts tore through the ruins. The sky lit up with streaks of plasma fire. Eli leaned out and fired 2 shots, hitting one drone. It exploded in a burst of sparks. Another swooped down, scanning for heat signatures. Lira moved her hand across the console, her fingers tracing symbols on the wall. The ancient ship responded with a low hum. I can overload the reactor, she said. When it blows, it'll fry their sensors. Eli blinked. That'll also fry us. She gave a faint, fearless smile. Then we better not be here when it happens. The two sprinted through the back corridors, their footsteps echoing against the hollow walls. The sound of metal groaning filled the air. The ship was dying, and they had minutes left to get out. Outside, the heat hit like fire. Sand whipped across their faces as they ran. The sky glowed red from the ship circling above. Then came the voice, deep metallic, amplified through a loudspeaker. Lira of the 7th line, the voice thundered. You were given mercy once. You refused it. Now you will die with your pet human. Lira froze mid-step. The voice was unmistakable. She looked up, and there he was. Commander Rian standing on a hovercraft platform, his armor black and silver, his face cold as stone. Brother, she whispered. Rian's visor retracted, revealing eyes just like hers, luminous, silver blue. But his gaze held no warmth. You brought shame to our bloodline. To our world? Eli stepped forward, gun ready. Funny, he said. From where I stand, looks like she's the only one who remembered what honor means. Ryan's glare turned to him. And you, human, have no place in our affairs. Eli smirked. You made it my affair when you chained her. The air crackled. Rian raised his weapon. Lira shouted, No! And threw up her hands. A sudden pulse of blue energy burst outward, a shield of light that shimmered like glass. The blast struck it and scattered harmlessly. Rian's eyes widened. You still wield the old power? Lyra's voice broke with emotion. You taught me, remember? For the first time, something flickered in his expression. Regret, or maybe confusion. You could have been so much more, he said. I chose compassion, she answered. And that made me stronger than you'll ever be. Eli took aim again. We're wasting time, he said. That reactor's going to blow. Lira nodded. Then let's end this. She raised her hand again, sending another pulse across the sand. It struck the nearest ship, shorting its thrusters. It spun out of control and crashed into the dunes, exploding in a ball of fire. The other hunters opened fire in rage. Eli returned shot after shot, his weapon glowing hot in his hands. Then came the shockwave, a deep, rumbling roar from behind them. The ancient wreck exploded, sending a wall of sand and energy rolling across the desert. The hunters were thrown back. The sky turned white. When the dust settled, the hovercrafts were gone. The horizon burned with smoke. Eli coughed, pulling himself up. "Still alive?" Lira nodded weakly, her body trembling from exhaustion. "The shield." It held. He looked at her, bruised, glowing, alive. "You did it." "No," she said softly, staring at the distant wreckage. "He let me," Eli frowned. "What?" "My brother," she whispered.
"He could have finished us."
But he didn't. The wind carried her words away into the endless dunes. Somewhere above, the last of the hunter ships vanished into the clouds. For the first time since her freedom, Lira allowed herself to breathe. But deep down, she knew. Mercy was never free, and her brother's mercy would come with a price. The desert burned under the midday suns, turning every grain of sand into a mirror of fire. Smoke still curled from the wreckage behind them, and the wind carried the bitter scent of scorched metal. Eli walked ahead, his eyes fixed on the horizon, while Lira followed silently, her steps heavy but her spirit restless. The hunters were gone for now, but not defeated. They stopped at a cluster of jagged rocks that offered shade. Eli sat down, his back against the stone, wiping sweat from his face. "We bought ourselves a little time," he said, breathing hard. Lira stood beside him, staring at the trail of smoke twisting into the sky. "No," she said quietly. "He let us go. My brother never misses. He could have destroyed us in one strike." Eli looked up at her, frowning. "Then why didn't he?" She didn't answer at first. The wind whistled between the rocks, whispering secrets only she seemed to understand. He hesitated, she finally said. "Maybe he saw the sister he lost, not the traitor they condemned." Eli's voice softened. "You still believe there's something good left in him?" Lira's eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. "Hope is the only thing I have left." The silence stretched between them until a sudden noise broke it, a faint hum of engines far off in the distance. Eli stood instantly, scanning the dunes through his visor. "Incoming," he muttered. "Fast," Lira's heart pounded. "It's him," she whispered. Moments later, a single hovercraft appeared over the ridge, cutting through the sandstorm like a blade. It stopped a short distance away. The engines powered down and the air grew eerily still. Then Commander Ryan stepped out, alone. He wasn't wearing his helmet now. The harsh sun caught the silver in his eyes and the scars on his jaw. His armor was scorched from the earlier fight. He looked less like a soldier and more like a ghost haunted by duty. "Lira," he called out, his voice deep but tired. "You should not have lived. Yet here you stand." Lira took a slow step forward. "I survived because mercy found me where honor failed." Ryan's gaze flicked to Eli. "You mean him?" he said with disdain. "The human who meddles in our affairs." Eli raised his weapon slightly. "You call it meddling. I call it saving a life." The commander's eyes narrowed. "Do you know who she is, human? What she's done? She built the code that enslaved thousands of your kind." Eli hesitated, glancing at Lira. Her eyes fell to the sand. "That was before," she said softly. "Before I saw what my inventions truly did. I tried to fix it. I freed who I could. They called it treason." Ryan's tone hardened. "You dishonored our bloodline. You betrayed the Dominion. And you betrayed yourself," she said. "You serve a system that feeds on fear." The commander's jaw tightened. "Enough words." He drew his plasma blade, its blue edge sparking in the sunlight. "Come with me now. I can't undo your crimes, but I can make your death swift." Eli stepped between them. "She's not going anywhere." "Move," Ryan ordered. Eli didn't. "You'll have to go through me first." For a moment, none of them moved. Then Ryan lunged forward. His blade slashed, colliding with Eli's plasma rifle in a flash of blue light. Sparks flew. The sand beneath them rippled from the force of the strike. Lira shouted, "Stop!" But neither man heard. Ryan struck again, fast and precise, his training evident in every move. Eli blocked, dodged, and countered, but he was human. Slower, heavier. A final blow sent his weapon flying. Ryan lifted his blade for the kill, and then Lira moved. Energy flared from her hands, glowing white-blue. It struck Ryan square in the chest, throwing him backward. He crashed into the sand, his blade spinning away. For a long second, no one spoke. The only sound was the hum of the fading energy field. Eli turned, breathing hard. "You didn't have to?" "I did," Lira interrupted, her voice trembling. She walked toward her fallen brother. His armor smoked where her energy had burned through it. She knelt beside him, tears blurring her vision. "Why couldn't you just let me go?" Ryan looked up at her, his expression caught between pride and pain. "Because you're still my sister." She froze, her hand hovering over him. "Then why?" "Because mercy," he whispered, coughing, "must sometimes wear the face of cruelty." The wind howled again, lifting sand around them like ghosts. Lira bowed her head, pressing her forehead to his. A single tear slipped down her cheek. "I will make this right," she said. "I swear it." Ryan's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Then and maybe you already have," his eyes closed. The light faded from his armor. Eli watched in silence as Lira sat beside her brother's still form. When she finally stood, her voice was steady but cold. "He spared me once. Now I'll finish what he couldn't, ending the Dominion's chain." Eli nodded slowly. "Then we do it together." She looked at him, her face streaked with dust and tears. "Together," she said, and as the sun sank into the dunes, casting blood-red light across the desert, the two walked toward the horizon, bound not by duty, but by a shared vow, to end the tyranny that had broken them both. The night fell heavy over the dunes, wrapping the desert in silence. The twin suns had vanished, leaving behind only the cold light of distant stars. Lira and Eli moved carefully through the darkness, guided by faint glimmers buried beneath the sand, ruins of something ancient. The wind whispered over stone, carrying the memory of a civilization long gone. Ahead, half buried under a dune, rose a jagged silhouette of black towers and silver arches. Broken spires reached toward the sky like fingers frozen in despair. The place felt alive, humming with quiet power. Lira stopped, her eyes wide with recognition. "The City of Shadows," she murmured. "My ancestors built this place before the Dominion existed. It was a city of peace, until war twisted it." Eli studied the ruins. "Looks abandoned now." "Not abandoned," she said softly. "Forgotten." They stepped through the shattered gates. The walls were covered in glowing runes, symbols pulsing faintly as if breathing. The air felt thick, charged with energy that made Eli's skin tingle. As they walked deeper, they entered a vast chamber filled with stone pillars. In the center stood a massive crystal monolith, cracked but still glowing from within. Lira approached it slowly, touching the surface with trembling fingers. "This is where they stored our history," she said. "Every memory, every secret of our kind. My brother once told me that this city was cursed, that those who entered never returned." Eli stepped closer, brushing sand from the carved floor. "You think it's true?" "Maybe," she said. "But if there are answers here, I'll find them." Her hand pressed against the monolith and light burst outward, flooding the chamber. The symbols along the walls came alive, spinning and rearranging. Holographic shapes flickered into existence. Images of towering cities, starships, and alien figures long dead. Eli shielded his eyes. "What is this?" "Our past," she whispered. "Look." The visions showed a time before the Dominion and when her people were explorers, scientists, and dreamers. Then came the war, and with it corruption. The same knowledge that once built wonders was turned into weapons. The images grew darker, showing cities burning, oceans boiling, and enslaved humans dragged into mines. Eli's fists clenched. "Your people did this?" "Yes," she said, guilt heavy in her voice. "And I helped create the code that allowed it." He turned to her, searching her face. "You're not that person anymore." "Tell that to the ghosts here," she said, voice shaking. "They whisper every night." As she spoke, the crystal's glow shifted to red. The ground trembled. A deep hum filled the air. Lira stepped back. "No, it's reacting to us." Eli raised his weapon instinctively. "What does that mean?" Before she could answer, the ceiling above cracked open and a beam of blue light shot down. From the dust, dark shapes emerged, hunter drones, sleek and silent, scanning the chamber. "They tracked us," Eli shouted. Lira's eyes darted upward. "No, not tracked, summoned. The city's defense system. It still functions." Energy bolts rained down. Eli fired back, his shots echoing through the vast hall. One drone fell, shattering into fragments. But more kept coming, gliding like shadows. Lira ran toward the central console. "I can override it!" "Hurry!" Eli yelled, ducking behind a fallen pillar as plasma seared the air beside him. Her fingers danced across the glowing surface, symbols shifting rapidly. Sparks flew. Almost there. The drones closed in, their lights flashing crimson. Eli took aim again, buying her seconds she didn't have. "Lira, I've got it!" she shouted. She slammed her palm down, and then suddenly everything went still. The drones froze mid-air, their lights dimming. The entire city fell silent. Eli lowered his weapon, breathing hard. "You did it," but Lira didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed on the monolith, which now glowed with a soft golden light. "No," she said. It did. The crystal projected a final image. Two figures standing side by side, a human and an alien woman, hand in hand, staring toward a rising sun. Beneath them appeared words in her language. Lira whispered the translation, "Forgive and be free." Eli looked at her. "What does it mean?" She smiled faintly, tears in her eyes. "That everything the Dominion built came from fear. But once my people believed in unity, in hope." The light began to fade, leaving only shadows and silence. Lira turned toward Eli. "This is what we've been fighting for. Not revenge, not survival, but redemption." Before Eli could reply, a distant roar filled the air. Outside the city, engines thundered again. The hunters were returning. Lira's face hardened. "He's coming," she said, her voice low. "Rian won't stop until one of us is gone." Eli checked his weapon, his expression grim. "Then we finish this, here, where it all began." The wind rose, sweeping through the hollow city as the last light from the crystal faded into darkness. The city of shadows was awake again. The wind howled through the broken towers of the ancient city as dawn crept across the desert once more. The golden light of the twin suns spilled into the ruins, setting the shattered glass and metal aglow. Eli stood beside Lira near the great crystal that had shown them the past. The air still hummed with the fading echoes of power, and somewhere far above, the engines of the approaching fleet grew louder. Lira's voice broke the silence. "He's here." Eli didn't have to ask who. The low hum of Dominion warships filled the sky like thunder. "Then this ends today," he said quietly, checking the last charge on his rifle. From the horizon, the lead ship descended, black, sleek, and burning with red light. It landed just beyond the city gates, kicking up waves of sand. The air shimmered with heat as the ramp lowered. Commander Ryan stepped out, his armor scarred, his face shadowed. He moved with the calm of a man who already knew the outcome. "Lira," he called, his voice echoing through the ruins. "You've gone too far." "This is not redemption. It's madness." Lira stepped forward, her silver hair catching the sunlight. "Redemption is the only thing left for me," she said. "And maybe for you too." He shook his head. "You don't understand. The Dominion can't be destroyed. It's bigger than us. It is us." Eli stepped beside her. "Everything ends, Commander. Even empires built on chains." Rian's gaze hardened. "Then I'll end you first." He raised his hand, and the hunters emerged from behind the dunes, armored soldiers, weapons glowing, forming a perfect circle around the ruins. The sound of energy charging filled the air. Lira felt her pulse quicken. "They'll level the city," she whispered. "Not if we stop them first," Eli said. "You saw what this place can do." "You said it still remembers." Her eyes widened. The crystal. The monolith at the center, still faintly pulsing like a heartbeat. She turned to him. "If I link with it again, I can awaken the city's core, but it'll need a conduit." Eli understood immediately. "You mean someone to channel the power?" "Yes," she said, her voice low. "And it might kill whoever does." He smiled faintly. "I've been dying since the war started. Might as well make it count." Before she could protest, he was already moving. Rayan shouted an order, and the hunters opened fire. Beams of plasma ripped through the air, exploding against the pillars. Eli dove behind a wall, returning fire. Lira ran to the monolith, pressing her hands against its surface. The runes flared bright gold, lighting the entire chamber. Energy surged through the ground, running along the ancient markings. The city itself seemed to awaken, its towers glowing like beacons in the dark. Rian's voice rose over the chaos. "You'll destroy everything." Lira shouted back, her voice trembling with both fury and grief. "No, I'll free it." Eli felt the ground shake beneath his boots. Light shot up from the crystal, spiraling into the sky. The hunter stumbled back, blinded. Rian shielded his face, his armor flickering with static. Then the beam turned white-hot, and Eli felt it hit him, a rush of warmth, of weightlessness. He looked down at his hands glowing with the same energy that burned in the air. For a moment he felt everything, the memories, the pain, the hope of 1,000 souls once trapped in this city. Lira turned toward him, tears in her eyes. "Eli, stop! It's too much." He shook his head, smiling through the blinding light. "You wanted redemption," he said. "Now we both get it." The energy exploded outward, not as destruction but as release. The hunter's armor shattered into dust. The ships above lost power, drifting helplessly. Rian fell to his knees as the light enveloped him. Lira ran to him, grabbing his hand. "Brother," she whispered, his eyes softened. "You were right. The chains were never meant to hold us." His voice faded with the light. When the energy finally dimmed, the desert was silent again. The hunters were gone. The ships lay scattered, powerless. The city of shadows glowed softly, no longer angry, peaceful as if at last it could rest. Eli lay near the monolith, barely conscious. Lira rushed to him, cradling his head. "Stay with me," she whispered desperately. "You can't leave now." He smiled weakly. "Guess I'm not as stubborn as I thought." "Don't," she said, tears falling. "Don't say that." He reached up, brushing a tear from her cheek. "You're free now, Lira, don't waste it," she shook her head. "You freed me twice, from chains and from guilt. I can't lose you too." But his eyes were already closing. "Then promise me one thing," he whispered. "Build something worth saving." His hand fell limp. The light faded from his skin. Lira held him close, her tears glowing faintly in the dawn light. For a long time she said nothing. Then she pressed her forehead to his and whispered the ancient vow of her people. "By the bond of freedom and the breath of stars, your light will never fade." Hours later, the first ship she rebuilt from the ruins rose quietly into the sky. The sands below shimmered gold as she looked back one last time. The city was gone now, buried beneath peace. She whispered softly into the wind. "For you, Eli Carter, and for all who dared to be free." And as her ship vanished into the endless stars, a faint voice echoed in the stillness, not in sound but in memory. Sometimes, the greatest salvation begins with one act of mercy.